people ask us to be ashamed of our history, we should be proud to recall these moments. We have nothing to be ashamed. We are proud of the history of working class achievements, and the glorious victories of the Soviet Army are not just the victories of the Soviet Army, the Soviet people, and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. They are victories of entire progressive humanity. As the Germans realized they could not defeat the Soviet Union at the gates of Moscow, and the German army was forced to retreat, having suffered huge losses in men and material, German soldiers wrote graffiti on the walls 30 miles away from the Kremlin. They said, "Farewell Moscow, we're off to Berlin." And the Soviet soldiers put a rejoinder, "We'll see you in Berlin." The surrender on the 1st of February 1943 at Stalingrad by the fascist general von Paulus and 23 other generals. Never in history have so many generals and a field marshal surrendered after one battle anywhere in the world. And when they actually came, I have seen the film, and the Russian officer in charge asked for their papers. As soon as he realized who they were, now, although they are fascists and they've done a lot of damage to the Soviet Union, there is a code of honor that at least among the communists is there. They were treated as officers, and straight away the Russian officer offers a cigarette to each other. I don't know whether he was trying to kill them through smoking about, but he offered them a cigarette, asked them to sit down, check their papers and who they were. And it would be of interest to know that because von Paulus had not carried on till the death and refused to take the poison pill and all the rest of it, he ended up by going to the newly formed GDR after the war and served as an advisor to the new GDR government. So Soviet Union, and they were able to get him, of course, to prisoners of war, German prisoners of war in the Soviet Union, and tell them exactly what was happening. So this was a tremendous victory. The question then is that if the Soviet Union won, what exactly are the reasons the Soviet Union won? Now, we've already discounted one great reason given by bourgeois historian General Winters. General Winters did not win the war. The first reason Soviet Union won the war is that it had got rid of all the fifth column within the Soviet Union. When Marshal Tukhachevsky, after a trial, secret military trial, by the military collegium of the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union was hanged along with 6 other generals, we were told the Red Army had been absolutely decapitated. There's no way Red Army could wage the war because the flower of its leadership had disappeared. Then there were 3 Moscow trials of traitors, traitors, saboteurs, and wreckers, the Trotskyites and Bukharinites. 51 of them were tried by the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union, and 50 of them were sentenced to be hanged, and one of them was given life imprisonment. I don't know what came of him, but he was not given the death sentence. We were told Soviet Communist Party just had been denuded of leadership. All the brilliant Bolsheviks had been killed, and nobody was there. The Soviet people were leaderless, both on the civilian front and on the army front. Well, if the Soviet army was leaderless, how did it go on to achieve the victories that I've already referred to? How come that it produced such brilliant and legendary generals whose exploits are known all over the world, such as Zhukov, Chuikov, Shtemenko, Yeremenko, Timoshenko, Vasilevsky, Sokolovsky, Rokossovsky, Konev, Voroshilov, Budenin, Naklis, Kulik, and many others more. The fact of the matter is, by destroying the enemies of the Soviet regime, by actually finishing them, they were no longer the traitors and collaborators in the Soviet Union. Didn't completely eliminate. There still were some traitors, but these were minor. They could be dealt with. The second reason for the victory of the Soviet Union was it was a socialist country. It was Soviet socialism that won the battles at Moscow, at Stalingrad. You know, a people who've been under siege for more than 3 years in Leningrad, and they refused to surrender. Each evening, the members of the Philharmonic Orchestra in Leningrad, who lived on quarter of the normal rations, actually performed without a break of a single night. You cannot break people like that. It had won, but Soviet socialism wasn't something which is just abstract. Soviet socialism had built, in the conditions of a very difficult world around them, the Soviet industry. There were a lot of opposition figures who said socialism could not be built, or that the tempo of socialist construction was too fast. It had to be slowed. It could not be slowed. If you look at bourgeois histories, they'll tell you Stalin didn't want people to consume anything. No bread, no butter, no milk, nothing, no vodka even. All he wanted was to produce steel, because Stalin ate steel for breakfast. He had steel for lunch and steel for the evening meal. No comrade. Soviet Union could not be strengthened, and without strengthening the Soviet Union could not have been involved in the crowning defeat of fascism by the Red Army. As early as 1931, Stalin, speaking at a conference of the leading personnel of socialist industry on 4th of February 1931, had this to say. It's a long quotation, I just want to give you one sentence. We are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good the distance in 10 years. Either we do it or they'll crush us. And it's so prophetic, even Isaac Deutscher, who hates Stalin, who is a Trotskyite, but sometimes there are exceptions to oxymorons. There's no such thing as an honest Trotskyite. But Deutscher is an honest Trotskyite bourgeois scholar, because when he sees facts, he cannot help doing that. He's written a trilogy of Trotsky, and when you read his trilogy of Trotsky, Trotsky comes out as a much diminished figure. He's also written a biography of Stalin. He hates Stalin, never misses an opportunity of saying what a mediocre person Stalin was. He wasn't intellectual, he wasn't this than the other. And when you finish reading that book, Stalin comes out larger than life. And Deutscher says that these words, then when read in the aftermath of the victories of the Soviet Red Army in the Second World War, looked very prophetic indeed. And in those 10 years, between 1931 and the attack by the Nazis in June 1941, the Soviet gross output of industry had increased by 8.5 times compared with Tsarist Russia in 1913. Whereas the output of large-scale industry had increased 12-fold, and the machine building by 35 times. Now these are remarkable achievements. The third reason for the victory was the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union lost 27 million people in the Second World War. Of these, 3 million were communists, members of the Communist Party. They were the first to actually volunteer for the war, and many of them got killed. But the code of conduct in the Soviet army was exceptionally high. Stalin's own elder son was captured by the Nazis. They tried to actually swap him, exchange him for some officers of the German army. And Stalin's answer was twofold. One, you do not actually exchange generals for an ordinary soldier. My son is an ordinary soldier. And secondly, all the Soviet prisoners of war in German camps are my sons and children, and I'm not going to have them. Can you imagine Mrs. Thatcher or Churchill or Cameron doing that? No, they'll have their children and send working class children to be fathers.